Okay, so let me just give you a quick snapshot of what we use, and then I will attempt to answer where we're at in the picture. But let me say right up front that as I sit here right now, I'm probably sort of, you cut me in half. I'd sit half in Vincent's camp and half of it in YOSSI's camp. The nature of our business is relatively simple, but we have Mac users and PC users. We have a network infrastructure with most of our people in one office in Johannesburg, but we also have some remote users that operate out of the US and share the same infrastructure. All of our users have remote access, so from client sides or from home or what have you, so there's that kind of aspect to it. More recently, I think just about everybody, the nature of knowledge work, everybody has telephone access to server services, so calendaring and email access to the server via their telephones. From a software point of view, I think it's pretty hard to beat Microsoft Office. We're also users of CS3 or 4, depending on where we're at right now. Those are the Mac users and the creative guys. So that's kind of our landscape. Our access is ADSL. So we have a network, which we have a server, which I believe is over-spec'd for our needs. We have a third party that manages our network. So we don't feel like we need to learn to do that stuff, but of course there's a cost associated with it. And while they're good, and I don't doubt their ability to service us, they're very much in this paradigm of the picture. And what I've been experimenting with, and I'm kind of like a lay techie, I don't know, what I know about technology is actually fundamentally dangerous, because I'll try and hack it myself, but we end up with situations like SharePoint. So SharePoint is wonderful, but it costs way more than SharePoint to set SharePoint up. And then you've got to train users on SharePoint. And so when I look at the total cost of ownership of some of the technologies that we currently own and do license, it's actually inaccessible to us for different reasons. Not because the software is expensive, but the actual go-live is too expensive for us. We started to scrummage around and find alternative solutions. And we found them, which is where we're starting to shift our kind of view to saying, could it be that we could exchange an infrastructure that probably costs us, I don't know, let's say $1 million plus a year for a relatively small business, and could we change that for something that costs half of that? So the hypothesis is to halve the cost in total. And what we've started to find is things like Google Sites, running controlled access sites, do a pretty good job of housing shared documents and access to files and documents. So it does a little bit of what SharePoint does, and I'm sure that if you put them against each other feature for feature, Google Sites would die. But for us, we didn't need a third party to set that up. It was really quite easy to set up and very easy to share. And for the users, they already have an appreciation for a browser world. And so the usability and the familiarity of their browser, whatever their browser is, makes that something quite easy. And the surprising thing is it cost us egg to set up. There were no consultants involved, and there's no software involved. Now, of course, it's not ideal, and we probably would outgrow something like that. But it does help provoke our thinking in terms of that's possible. Similarly, I had an incident this weekend. Our mail went down. Now, how I knew it was down, even though we've got a 24/7 service contract, is that when I woke up, I had no mail. So I'm the proactive one making the call to the call center. Of course, they're very obliging and they're very helpful, and they start doing a whole lot of things and jumping through hoops. And 4 phone calls later, at about lunchtime, we've got it figured out that some DYN, DNS, da-da-da-da-da thing was not working, and now it was, and it was all fine, and cheers, Bob, my mail came flooding back. Now, if Gmail goes down, or if something else that's in the cloud goes down, I'll never know about it, because they'll know about it, and they'll fix it before I've figured it out. And I think that's also quite valuable. So another provocation shifts me from this traditional world to saying, could it be that everything one day goes into the cloud? Could it be that, for us, can we really use technology like a utility that we plug in and use what we need to? Another example, just keeping with some of these applications, we don't have a complicated software requirement. Our accounting is run just by the accounting people. The whole business doesn't need to access it. So that's pretty simple. Our workflow is pretty simple in that teams work on the documents and the outputs themselves. And so there's no real necessity for collaboration in that respect. But things like CRM and project management are of value. Our history is that we ran a product called ACT. We bought it because it was inexpensive. But I start to feel the clumsiness of it when I compare it against something very simple like High-Rise from 37 Signals, which has a very simple licensing proposition. But because we're not a technology business and ACT falls out of the service level agreement from our providers, I'm the kippie who goes around and loads it onto new people's machines. A machine gets reformatted, and I'm going to load it and pulling out old licenses and linking it up and doing all of those types of things. And that alone strikes me as being inefficient. Whereas with something like High-Rise or Basecamp or something like it, you're into that interface so very, very quickly, and you're up and running. The feature set is diminished, but we didn't use everything anyway because we're small. Well, one day I hope that changes, but it is another example of how we've been using the cloud. Now, the big problem, and it is actually a problem, is that access can be incredibly slow. So we're looking at alternatives now, but that becomes expensive. And by slow, I mean devastatingly slow. With one ADSL line, even if it's a 4 meg line, we're in Rosebank, so we get, I think, as good as the network can offer. I believe last week SAT3 went down or something like that. Well, just as well we've got other things to work on, because suddenly the joys of Google Sites and the joys of Basecamp and High-Rise are significantly diminished because you can fall asleep waiting for that page to load. And if I was starting the business today, I would go for Google Apps Premium so that I can use my own domain, because I think that's important. I would probably try and convince my employees to own their own hardware, because every time they walk out the door, I don't want to sit with old redundant machines. And getting an old desktop is acceptable, but starting a new job and getting an old laptop is like, it's like sharing a toothbrush. And I'd rather see that technology. I'd like to see people arrive with it and leave with it and love it like their own, because we do that with our phones. So it would be nice to be able to do that. The note to Spartan, finance individuals, not companies. You know, and so if I was starting today, I would do that. The reality is we've got we've got 8 or 9 years of data. I can't push that into the cloud. The bandwidth costs alone of pushing that into the cloud would be a problem. And yeah.
I think that this last point actually illustrates the whole purpose of this session, which is that there's a gap between users and sort of providers of technology. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the first of several sessions that we're going to have on technology, because obviously this is nowhere near exhausting the topic. There's so many issues that need to be addressed. So please watch that space. We'll be delighted to have some of you guys back with perhaps other technology providers as well. But it was our expectation that we would not solve that problem in one session, by any stretch of the imagination. So with that, I want to perhaps ask you to help me thank our panelists for today, and we'll continue the discussion. To me, is sort of signaling me also to ask you not to forget to fill out the evaluation form. That's something that she cares about. But in the meantime, please join me in thanking Rob, Yoshi, and Vincent.